Hello, everybody. It is Aiden here with the JAL Season 1 draft analysis for our Duos League in the Infernape division. I am joined today by Exaltus Halo.
Hello.
With Kuma.
Hello.
And with the Analyst Alakazams.
Hey,
And,
how's it going?
Today we will be going through every single team, giving our thoughts and kind of seeing who has the best chances pre-week 1 as to who will be winning this league. Alakazams, I'll go ahead and have you start us off on the Goobing Goobers.
All right, so first looking at this team, it automatically stands out as a really, really strong squad. You've got Dragapult and Great Tusk, two perennial first-round picks, and sandwiched between them, you have one of the best megas in Mega Diancie. Your Fairy Steel Dragon Core is literally an OU Fairy Steel Dragon Core and Corviknight, Diancie, and Dragapult. So you're really coming in hot with probably some of the best picks you could possibly have in the top 4, supplemented by some good value late round picks like Rhydon. I think Terra Rhydon's vastly undervalued, with Terra Water, Lightning Rod, really only weak to grass and not very non-offensive type. So it's kind of like Rhydon almost has no weaknesses, which is kind of crazy. And if you do end up hitting a Rhydon weakness, you could end up getting that Rock Polish set. It can run it too. You don't even have to necessarily be weakness policy. Rock Polish Sword Stance, I know, is pretty popular for Rhydon to sweep with. They have Volbeat. I really like Volbeat. I think Volbeat's really good at deterring setup, which could end up being problematic for this team because their walling power isn't super high. A lot of their guys don't have HP recovery, so being able to stop a team from breaking through with setup is very important for Volbeat. I think Volbeat actually has a pretty good role in this team. I think Volcarona is a decent pick. I'm still iffy on Volcarona in draft. It seems to be hit or miss a lot of the time. But I do think all 3 Terra Captains are very, very strong here. This is probably going to end up being one of the better teams. It has very few flaws. Araquanid's a great Terra Captain. It gives them access to sticky webs, which is pretty huge. Great Tusk could be booster attack with sticky webs up, or those could end up helping Rhydon maybe. So overall, a very strong team for sure.
Yeah, obviously it looks definitely top heavy, but there are definitely a lot of great low value picks here. Like you said, Volbeat, Rhydon, even Magneton. I've found myself helping people with certain matchups, and Magneton has a specific role. Most of the time, it's specs with Analytic. It can be Scarf, it can run Eviolite as well, but most of the time it's probably choiced. But as a Steel Electric type, it has some great coverage. It can do a lot of good things. And being supported by, Araquanid, Corviknight, Tusk, Pult, it's just having everything fit together the way that it did is kind of crazy that it happened the way it did. But I think it definitely fits really well, and I'm excited to see what this team can cook up with their out-of-the-box building methods. All right, and then next we have the Canadian Clodsires. Kuma, how about you start us off with this one?
I think this is probably a pretty strong draft given the players are very comfortable with a lot of these Pokemon. It doesn't have many weaknesses compared to what these players normally draft. Mug and B are very comfortable with very odd picks like Fion and Hisuian Zorua and Glaceon. But they also have really strong picks like Overpun, Wellspring, and Goldingo. Mega Glade is also seems out of their wheelbox, but apparently it's B's. B really likes it. So I think this team is really strong, especially in setup, and also setup deterrent, and with Goldingo screens, and they have Umbreon, who just never dies, and Clodsire as well. Can deny hazards pretty well with Court Chain Cinderace. Other than that, actually, their hazard removal isn't the best. They have Defog Rotom, but it's not the best. I think it's a pretty solid draft overall, though.
Exalted, any additional thoughts on this?
No, not really. I think Kuma kind of hit all the points that I was possibly going to say on the head.
All right, definitely. Go ahead. ahead.
Yeah, I think the team is a little odd in that Fion isn't Terra this time. Usually you want the Fion to be Terra. Without it, it's kind of loses its umph a little bit. I'm worried that Fion and Hisuian Zorua aren't going to end up doing much, and I know they've Mugs used Glaceon before, so I think that can do something. I don't love Terra Flygon. I know the season it was Terra, season 4 of PBO, it did a lot of stuff, but I don't love it as a Pokemon. Something about this is a little odd to me. The Mega Gallade plus Ogerpon Water plus Cinderace with Rotom Heat. I feel like there might be a little bit of overlap. I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of a type overlap, but not necessarily in a way that's for like overwhelming with a specific type. I think you do have Umbreon Clodsire, which is a good core for sure. I do like that defensively, and I do think Mega Gallade is a very strong Mega. And I think Golden Go is also very huge here. I think Golden Go is very key for Clodsire. I like Clodsire Golden Go a lot for getting up the hazards and then preventing the removal of the hazards. The hazard removal on this team is very weak, which seems to be a theme with these two I see, is they usually don't care for hazard removal. I think it will bite them a few weeks. We'll see.
All right. Then we have the Kook-Alligators. So starting off with this team, seeing Spectrier, Tinglu, Sneasler, that is always three very top tier picks, all very threatening, and seeing a Thwacky down there at the end allows Sneasler in, if it ever wants to or needs to go unburdened, it can. Thwacky can be kind of a wasted pick in that regard, but it can do a few things. Definitely isn't the premier terrain setter that you'd like to see when you have a Sneasler. But otherwise, like Zapdos, Jirachi, Alomomola definitely seems like a very kind of bulky supporting cast around Spectre, Sneasler. Even Mega Gardevoir can be surprisingly bulky. It has an insane special bulk. Hit it with a physical move and it'll kind of screw off, but I like Sableye as well, being the prankster utility, sort of like Will-O-Wisp, Recover, stuff like that is going to be very, very valuable to this team. And then having Seismitoad as well to just negate any sort of water type that would come at Tinglu is very, very nice. A little weak to grass this team is, but there are definitely some good enough resistances to where it doesn't really matter all that much.
All right.
Yeah.
Or you want to go? All right.
I mean, the only piece I'm not really getting here, and it could be due to my inexperience to draft overall, is I feel like Articuno is a little weird into the team without any snow support, as I feel like the one condition I've seen it used in as this snow sweeper, or just using snow in general to increase its bulk. So I feel like it's a little weird without no Slowking or like way to set snow manually.
Yeah, Articuno is surprisingly fat, but I agree without snow it is a good portion worse. I do really like Seismitoad. I think Seismitoad's a decently underrated Pokemon. Back in Gen 8 for a bit, it was OU, mainly because of Dracovish, and I thought it was good then. Like, even against non-Dracovish teams, I thought Seismitoad still hold its own as a pretty decent Pokemon. I'm a pretty big fan. I'm worried about this team's passivity. I think this team has, like, a bunch of support Pokemon in Aloe, Sableye. To an extent, Jirachi can be support a lot. You could be Scarf if you want. But you're not even doing a ton of damage with Jirachi. You're kind of going for flinches if you're Scarf. And then Thwacky's support. Tinglu is support. You can run the Banded set. I know that's, kind of popular, but it's mostly a support Pokemon. Zapdos, a lot of these Pokemon can be offensive, but offense isn't their main strength. So it kind of comes down to like Sneasler and Spectrier and Mega Gardevoir to be these offensive threat pillars for the team. When Mega Gardevoir isn't super fast, and Sneasler has a lot of very common counters in like ground types and ghost types that can be kind of problematic for it. I do think Sneasler and Spectrier help each other out a little bit here for sure. This team's hazard removal, if I'm looking, is non-existent unless, some of these guys get defogged that I'm not aware of. I believe it's
I'm pretty
non-existent.
sure it's only Zapdos
Yeah,
and Articuno.
Zapdos and
technically.
Articuno. Yeah, so I'm just worried a little bit about passivity with this team. I think Spectre is really important to get a lot of kills late game after chipping down with like Tinglu hazards and like flip turns from Aloe and just all the passive guys kind of surviving for a while to chip everything down, and then Spectre coming in to clean up the end game, or Sneasler coming in. I think because Thwacky is your guy, you're going to end up running, instead of like the SD set, you're probably going to be running like Bandit a lot. I like Bandit Sneasler a good amount. If you're going to be SD, you're probably going to be White Herb, I'm guessing, which I don't hate. I find Sneasler to get walled very often. Like, there's some ground type or something that kind of just sticks it to Sneasler, like a Clodsire or a Gliscor. It just doesn't usually have the coverage in draft to be super effective, I find. But I could see this team working for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely. It seems, in my opinion, it seems very unconventional. But maybe these guys are just more comfortable with these picks than we really know. Maybe we'll see something interesting. I do think having only like 3 really offensive mons, and none of them are really like breakers except for Mega Guard, is gonna be a little bit of a problem for them. But I'm sure they can find like ways around that issue.
All right. With that, we
I
move
think
on to the Albuquerque
Aiden is
Altarias.
not here. So should we move on to the next one?
I was muted. My bad.
Yeah.
We move on to the Albuquerque Altarias. Ben, go ahead and start us off.
All right, yeah, I was. This was one of the teams that immediately caught my eye. I think this team's very strong. Tentacruel's a really good spinner. It's a good flip turner. Gliscor, I think, is become slightly underrated in draft. It doesn't get drafted in the first like 2 rounds when it should. It's better than. It's one of the better ground types. I think it's better than like Tinglu, for example. I think it's easily better than Tinglu. I like Gliscor more than like Landorus Therian, for example, in draft. I think Annihilate is. It went first round here, so I guess I can't say it's underrated, but overall, in the grand landscape of things, I think Annihilate is worthy of a first round pick in draft. I think it's a draft warping Pokemon because you have to be very scared to attack when Annihilate is on the opponent's side. Meowscarada in the 4th round is a massive steal. I think Mega Altaria is maybe a little underrated because of its versatility to be a support Pokemon, physical or special, and potentially dangerous as a setup Pokemon. The Terra Captains are fine, a little weak in my opinion. I think Raiku's like a fine Terra Captain, but ultimately he's like all the other. I mean, probably stronger because he's just slightly bulkier, but he's like all the other electric types. I'm assuming the Terra types are like Ice and Fairy and that.
It's open Terra, so you can choose whatever Terra you want.
This is open Terra.
Open Terra, that's fine. He's like all the other fast electric Terras, but he could be like sub Calm Mind too, I guess. I think Shuckle with Terra, I can't imagine it's ever gonna Terra, because you kind of bring Shuckle in to die and then get the hazards up. Beware is a good Terra. I wish Type Null was Terra. I think Type Null benefits immensely from Terra, and I think Type Null is actually a pretty good Pokemon, especially when it has Terra. I think Tinkaton's a good support Pokemon. I haven't even talked about Chi-Yu, who's a really, really nice, when you're pivoting around with, like, say, U-turn Annihilate and U-turn Meowscarada and flip-turn Tentacruel and Volt-switch Terra Raikou, and you can get your Chi-Yu in at just the right time and click Specs Overheat to get a kill. I'm a big fan. This is probably... It's probably not technically as good as the team in the Goobing Goobers, but this is probably my favorite team of the 4 teams we've discussed so far. I think this team is very strong.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got every sort of piece you're looking for. It's got your special breakers, it's got your physical breakers, you've got hazards, you've got removal, you've got plenty of defense, Gliscor, Tentacruel, Beware, like Tinkaton, Annihilate being there is always scary for any team. And I'm interested to see just kind of the mode that this team will run on a week-to-week basis, because it can run webs one week and have Chi-Yu just be specs and just kill things. It can be, just straight up balls to the wall offense with Meow, Annihilate. It can be Scarf Chi-Yu. It can be like, Raikou, D-Dance Mega Altaria and just try to run you over. Or it can take, sort of a more backseat and just kind of chill, like wait for things to get kind of chipped by hazards, maybe Toxic from Gliscor, Tentacruel, or like, T-Spikes or something, and then just go in with like Chi-Yu or Annihilate at the end and just like set up one thing and then sweep the rest of the game. But this team is definitely very interesting, definitely one that I'm scared to see if it's on my schedule. And so with that, we move on.
Well, I will add one thing. This team has very low pure recovery. And what I mean by that is like Roost, Recover, those kind of moves. Gliscor can recover, obviously, Annihilate has Drain Punch and all that, but I think it's only Altaria Roost that is pure recovery on this team. So,
because
yeah.
this is that dex, Gliscor will be getting Roost.
Oh, Gliscor does get Roost? Oh,
Yeah,
sick.
Gliscor
All right,
has
yeah.
Roost.
This team's very strong. Strong. All right.
All right, so now we move on to the Sacramento Slow Kings. Kuma, start us off.
I don't like this team. Not in the sense that it's bad, but because it looks very, very scary. I think their Terra captains are probably like at least top 3 of the drafts. Overall, I think Hisuian Electro, Rotom Frost, and Hisuian Typhlosion all benefit from Terra really, really well. I think Dracovish is something you always kind of have to respect, especially when they have a Hatterene and they have some slow Pokemon that can benefit from Trick Room. So Dracovish could maybe run Band in some matchups instead of just running Scarf. I think Garganacl is a little bit weaker without Terra, but I still do think something you have to respect. Mega B and Tornadus really shore up their speed tiers and are also threats in themselves. And King Gambit is the most robbery Pokemon that Game Freak's ever made. I hate this Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this team is, it's pretty good. It's really strong, right? It's really, really strong. The pure damage output from like Dracovish, King Gambit, Hatterene's really strong. The 3 Terra Captains are all offensive. Rotom Frost can be defensive, but they're mainly offensive Terra Captains. Mega Beedrill, Mabosstiff, all incredibly strong Pokemon. I wish Mabosstiff was Terra. I wish they could have fit that in somehow. The only thing that like kind of catches me a little off guard is that middle, that Hatterene plus Slowking plus Garganacl. Hatterene and Slowking perform semi-similar roles in a team. They could be Trick Roomers. They're kind of like fat defensive Psychics. Psychic's not a great defensive type to begin with, but they can both pull it off relatively well. But it is weird having both on the same team, I feel. They're both kind of passive a little bit of a, I think Hatterene can be much more offensive, which is kind of what this team's going for, is pure offense, because, again, in terms of hazard control, this team has no spinner, so it comes down Rotom.
Yes.
I think Rotom has Defog,
Yes.
right? So it comes down to those 3. When you're relying on Defog, the issue is all your hazards are not negated. I guess negated's like a strong word, but much less effective, because then if they can basically cancel your hazards and force you to waste a turn by going for hazards themselves. So that might force their like Torn T to be Boots a lot, for example. It might force their Beedrill to be much less effective because he's going to be coming in on hazards unless he wants to get rid of his own hazards. This team has a lot of strong pivoting. Torn T is like a really good pivoter, which can let Dracovish get in. Dracovish functions in a very similar way to Chi-Yu. You pivot around to try and get it in for the big hit. You've got the 2 Volters, you've got 2 U-turners, probably the strongest U-turner in the game in Mega Beedrill. And 2 really strong Volters who can, Terra Electric Volt to be even stronger. So the pivoting is really strong here, especially with Chili Reception, Slowking. It's like a good team, a little bit odd in construction, I would say.
I just wanted to build off a point of the defog thing, though, which is I feel like they did kind of, while obviously not having sprinters suck, I'm not seeing a lot of hazards on their side. So really, the only way they potentially punish themselves by defogging is by getting like rocks up with either Gambit, but I don't think Gambit wants to run rocks most weeks, and then or Garg. But besides that, I think the only other hazards they have are like obviously anything from Hatterene, and then like Toxic Spikes from Beedrill. But I don't think you want Toxic Spikes on Beedrill. So I think it's actually kind of smart because they're not as scared to click Defog as most.
Yeah, I will say also no ground type, which is an
That's
interesting
true.
choice. No ground, and their grounded poison is Beedrill. So I would try to bring a Pokemon with Stealth Rocks and Toxic Spikes against this team. Both. I would try to bring like some sort of poison type, like Glamora or Clodsire. I like that kind of thing here.
Electric types look kind of crazy in this team because even Hisuian Electrode and Rotom Frost don't really want to take any sort of like specs boosted sort of like electric move, except for Hisuian Electrode, which is quad resistant to electric. But if that's your only electric resist, just bring coverage.
Yeah, no ground is unfortunate for sure.
But with that, we move on to the Pennsylvania Piplups. Exalted, go ahead and start us off with this one.
Okay, well, I mean, first thing I'm seeing is I feel like there's a very strong Dragon Steel Fairy Core going on here with Megaladios, Celesteela, and Sylveon. I think these are all just some pretty good Pokemon. I'm not really seeing any too insane gimmicks. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong here on that point, though, that Manaphy does get Tail Glow, so obviously teams are going to have to play around that, because +3 anything is going to hurt. I'm a pretty big fan of Hisuian Zoroark myself. I think that mod could put in some work. And I just think this is a really overall good team. There's not a whole lot of gimmicks going on, but I don't know if they need gimmicks to succeed.
Yeah, having some decent hazards with like Donphan, I think Celesteela gets hazards, like at least rocks.
I would not be shocked.
I don't think it does.
I don't believe so.
Okay, I wasn't entirely sure. I've never used them on myself. But their team, if that's the case, then is somewhat lacking hazards. But they have two pretty decent spinners. Donphan's a really good one. Hitmontop is less so, considering it doesn't really get a move to hit ghost types, which is really unfortunate. You would think it'd have something to like knock off at least, or maybe pursuit, or something along those lines. But unfortunately, it's not.
It does get pursuit in that deck.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
I'm pretty
does?
sure.
Okay, well then there's
Pursuit's
something.
nice.
Yeah. It also gets Sucker Punch. That is an option.
Okay. But anyway, they do have two good spinners. And then having that bulky dragon fairy steel core, like you said, is very, very good. Manaphy does have Take Heart banned, so with Manaphy you just kind of have to be careful with status. Make sure you kind of like position it correctly in order to make sure that it can do its job properly. And then I do like Roserade. However, unfortunately, Hidden Power as well is banned, so it isn't as good as what it could be. But I do think this team overall is pretty strong. They do have a ground type in Donphan. Unfortunately, it is very specially weak, so just one like special, or I guess technically two special water or grass moves, as long as there aren't any hazards up, or if it has boots to break sturdy, will just kind of do it in. But those moves will also be hard to hit on it, as they have a Celesteela, Roserade, Megaladios, and so yeah, it's definitely going to be very hard to break through, but definitely looks like it has a few weaknesses, a few holes you could probably exploit with this.
Yeah, I think this team's just pretty solid all around. You know, it has everything. It has the two cores that everyone says you need. Its speed tiers are good. We haven't really talked about the Terras yet. These are only two on this team. I think they're really, really powerful Terras. I think having Terra Darmanitan is pretty crazy. I think that's a really, really strong Pokemon to have the ability to Terra. You know, Fire Flare Blitz, Choice Band. I imagine 2-hit KOs every Pokemon in the game that isn't immune to fire. Or like quad resists.
Yeah.
I think Mega Latios is a pretty underrated, because it's like, looks the same as Latios, so people think they're similar. They're not. Latios is way better. It's pretty crazy how better it is. Celesteela is really annoying. They've got a really nice, Latios Celesteela core there. that can kind of be really fat and sit there, and Sylveon can pass wishes, which is all nice support for Donphan, who I think is a really good Pokemon. I'm a big Donphan fan. I think, having the way to pass wishes to it is also really beneficial for it. And in terms of speed, they got Roserade and Kilowattrel and Darmanitan who can be Scarf, and they got Hisui and Zoroark in it, at base 100 just to keep it level. They got Manaphy. The team hits all the points. I don't think it's like a crazy team in any way. It's not super unique or anything, but they hit everything they need to. It's well constructed, well put together, and navigated well. This team could win probably any matchup just because it's so well rounded. So you just gotta, find the angle you want to go at with every opponent.
All right, and with that, we move on to my team and Exalted's team, the Missouri Mewtwo's. So Ben and Kuma, take it away with this one.
I think you guys have constructed a pretty decent roster. I think the speed tiers are pretty okay. Fastest being Azelf is fine.
Fastest is
I like-
Salazar.
Forgot. Double Water with Tapu Fini, Hisui, and Samurott is fine. They don't really they share the water weaknesses, but their secondary types don't really make them share any other weaknesses, so it's fine. Mega Scizor is scary. Drapion as a grounded poison and just standard dark type is also really good for its price point. I like Mamoswine a lot. I think this mon is really scary with Scarf, and you can also run like Sash or just straight up Band and just hit things really hard. Infernape has a lot of versatility in its sets, just being like some annoying like lead taunt set with Stealth Rock and Sash, or just run Nasty Plot or Choice Band, SD, something like that. Is also a very threatening Pokemon. The Terracaps, I believe they're Azelf Mismagius?
Yes.
Yeah. Azelf with Open Terra, completely demonic Pokemon. This one should get at least 7 kills. If it doesn't, you're both frauds. Mismagius as a Terra Captain is also very threatening. I think this is a very overall solid roster. But what do you think, Ben?
Seems interesting, a little unconventional. I don't think it's necessarily bad though when you actually like dive a little bit into the interactions that are going on. The first thing you notice, or at least the first thing I noticed, was Hisui and Samurott into Tapu Fini, round 2 and 3, 2 waters. But then you actually have to consider like what Hisui and Samurott actually is. Is it really like, because most drafts want a defensive water. Is Hisui and Samurott ever that? It can be with Assault Vest, but usually not. Hisui and Samurott's usually there to early game, spam some Ceaseless Edges, get some hazards up, and do some chip, maybe get a kill or 2 if you're lucky, and really make the early game to your advantage. It's not there for super long longevity, so that's kind of the role Tapu Fini wants to fill after that. I do think Mega Scizor is the best Mega in the game when Hidden Power isn't allowed, by a pretty good margin. Of the ones that are allowed, I'm assuming. Yeah, of the ones allowed, Mega Scizor is, in my opinion, the best Mega in the game. I think like they've got some like Infernape a lot of times doesn't go drafted. I think Infernape's very good. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorite Pokemon to run defensively when people don't run it defensively all the time. I like Rocky Helmet Infernape a lot with Slack Off. Drapion's an interesting Pokemon. I don't dislike Drapion. I think an issue that Drapion can kind of come across is trying to be defensive when it should be trying to be offensive, I guess is what I'm thinking. A lot of people try to make Drapion something it's not. I think it can sometimes do some defensive stuff, but it has no sustainability, really. They do have Cyclizar, who in my opinion is the best, there's like a tier gap of guys, of spinners, and Cyclizar is probably the best, below 10-point spinner. He's the best low-tier spinner. by far, in my opinion. Heliolisk, non-Terra, a little bit of an odd choice. I don't really know what Heliolisk is going to do necessarily. I believe Heliolisk is like 101 base or 106 base speed, 108, something like 109. Yeah. Somewhere around there. It's a fast electric, so I'm assuming that's what they were going for. Maybe they could run Sunny Day one week. Sunny Day Azelf. I'm imagining that was kind of in their thoughts with like Infernape plus Heliolisk. Obviously, you know, not great for Mega Scizor, but probably Mega Scizor wouldn't come that week, or it wouldn't come out when the sun's up, is the idea. I think the Terra Captains are good. Miss Magius has always been a classic Terra Captain. Does some really strong stuff. Mamoswine as your ground is so I usually like, at least me personally, I like defensive ground types. I just feel scared and a little skittish when Mamoswine is your ground and you have Samurai Hisui and Tapu Fini. You do have some resistant like Cyclizar who can be Assault Vest, and then he becomes a very good electric resist, so there is that at least. Offensively, I really like Mamoswine. Obviously, it's got that built-in ground ice that's devastating for so many teams. It really clears like so many squads can't handle that dual coverage. So I think they've got some unique picks, but if you actually like look into how they interact together, this team does make sense. This team does have like some cohesion going on for what they're trying to accomplish.
All right, thank you for that. And now we go on to the miscellaneous missing no. The two coaches of this team agreed on a theme. I'm gonna let the people in the comments guess what that may be. Yeah, the miscellaneous missing no's start off with Darkrai, who can seem a little fraudulent at times, especially without like Terra or anything, which it should never be allowed to in draft. But then they paired it with Landorus and Raging Bolt, a demonic core. That is going to be very, very scary to play against. Then they also decided to draft Keldeo, Mega Aggron. Mega Aggron can be a very, very good wall for a lot of different things. Losing that rock typing helped it a lot, being a lot less weak to fighting now, a lot less weak to ground. Two very like common like coverage or just moves ran on multiple Pokemon. And then I also like Lele, Monkey Dory. Those two paired together are I think going to be really, really scary. And then love Dhelmise. We wanted it on our roster, unfortunately got a little sniped. And then Arc-Ups and Slacking rounded out. Slacking, always something you always have to respect, whether or not it comes or not on a weekly basis. Should be fairly easy to play around, but always something you have to respect. Choice Band, Giga Impact, Double Edge, always going to be something that can do massive, massive damage on any given turn at any point in the game. But definitely overall a solid roster. Has Spin, Defog with Landorus, so both modes of hazard removal. They have hazards themselves with Landorus. Even I think Archeops might get rocks. But overall just solid roster. I don't see too many glaring weaknesses other than that Lele kind of goes against Raging Bolt a little bit in what it wants to do. Raging Bolt likes to click Thunderclap, catch things off guard, things like that, which Lele will prevent. But I mean, that should be pretty easy to play around. Either just don't bring Lele or just make sure Bolt isn't in on the psychic terrain. But overall, solid roster. Kuma, you want to give a little input on this one?
I mean, really not much to say. Their roster is very much just hit thing hard. But I do think some of their Pokemon have some like defensive utility. Like Landorus is a Swiss Army knife of a Pokemon. Dhelmise can hit hard, but it's also can be very defensive since it gets things like Synthesis. And since it does have that massive attack stat, it can still hit things really hard while taking all the hits.
I think we will be surprised by how often Dhelmise ends up coming. I think Dhelmise will be coming a lot because it's the spinner and also because it is the only Pokemon on this team that has any form of health recovery, I believe.
think Archeops gets Roost, but don't quote me.
I would say no because then it would let it go above its ability, and I
It
think they
does
don't
get
like that.
Roost.
It does get Roost. Okay.
Had to give this mono
So-
a little bit of something.
Yeah.
So Archeops gets Roost, but in terms of Pokemon that are actually going to be doing like sitting and clicking recovery moves, Dhelmise is like Aggron can run Rest. That's a decently common set. Is Rest Aggron, but the recovery on this team isn't very great. So I'm imagining these games are going to be very quick that this team uses.
Mhm.
They're going to try and be as strong as possible.
All right. Heading into the home stretch, we have the Hamilton Torracats. Exalted, go ahead and start us off with your thoughts on this team.
Okay, first thing I see right off the rip is a Mega Mawile, which is a very scary Pokemon. I do not know its base attack, but I know huge power anything is scary, and that mon does not have the low attack of a lot of other huge power mons. So, it can be very hard to switch into. You also have mons like Latios, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it's probably a skill issue on my part. I feel like it's gonna probably be running either like Calm Mind Recovery most weeks or Choice something, Choice Specs, Choice Scarf. Other things I'm seeing is no. If Halusha wants to get an burden off, it's most likely gonna have to be White Herb, which is not always the best, but Halusha can definitely make it work. Also, two bulky waters is. I mean, water is a type that you can splash on, but I fear the Melodic and Swampert feel a little bit of the same role. It's definitely not a complete overlap of one of another, but they definitely can fall into the same niche. I am a big fan of Skeldurge, one of my favorite Pokemon personally. I think you can put in a lot of work as an unaware wall. You can do more defensive sets, or you can just go all out with, Torch Song. That's scary. Yeah, you got speed, I think, with Jolteon. Jolteon's pretty fast, a lot of fast stuff. I keeps a solid team in my opinion.
Yeah, this team is surprisingly fat. Like first glance, it maybe doesn't look it, but if you look, Milotic, Skeletor, Swampert, Pheasantipity, Wo-Chien, really, really fat stuff here. Obstagoon is very strong. I kind of wish Obstagoon was Terra over Milotic. I kind of wish Wo-Chien was Terra. It not being Terra makes it significantly worse, in my opinion. Halucha, like this team is good. There's just a few odd things are keeping it from being like fantastic, right? Like Exalted mentioned, Milotic plus Swampert, they are similar, and I think Milotic is just better. I get that they need a ground type. I have to assume there's a different ground type they could have gone for. If I'm looking at this right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so I think the sixth pick was coming back up, right? If I'm looking at this correctly.
The sixth pick.
So the sixth pick in the draft, was it coming back up? The snake? Did they pick before the Pennsylvania Piplups?
6 was coming, back up the draft order.
Yeah.
Alright, so they picked before the Pennsylvania Piplups. They should have taken Donphan in that spot over Swampert for sure. I do think that the team has some good stuff. Terra Jolteon, again, as we see in a lot of drafts all around leagues, it always works to a decent effect. Terra electric types to hit grounds, and if they don't have a ground to punish teams with bad grounds, is always effective. It's like the most basic form of matchup fishing. Dirge to stop setup is good. Mega Mawile, disastrously strong. Halucha, I don't really know why it's there, but it can be good. I had it in one season that I played, and it did really well. Although I had terrain that season, but I don't think you necessarily need terrain. Like Exalted said, White Herb works perfectly fine. You just don't immediately get the speed boost.
All right. And now, move on to the Headless Dashers, the other Megalotti. And so immediately looking at this team, you see Tapu Koko, and you see one other Paradoxmon. Granted, that Paradoxmon is Iron Thorns, which I do believe is a Terra Captain, and from what I've heard, Iron Thorns has the potential to be a very strong Terra Captain in the right hands. Looking at others, though, Garchomp, Megalodios, 2 dragons back to back. This team is looking pretty weak to Fairy. The only resists are like Revavroom, Cinescorch, and Scizor. Scizor being the biggest one there. And Revavroom, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it is a Terra Captain.
I believe
It is. It is.
Okay, a lot of the time, Revavroom, if it does come, will want to Terra out of its weaknesses, because obviously having a 4x weakness to ground, the only way to negate that is a Air Balloon, which you can easily like use a pivoting move on, or something of that sort, to just negate that. So their fairy weakness is pretty big, especially if the fairy in question has a fire move to hit Scizor. It's definitely going to be very, very tough for this team to function outside of that. But overall, even Terrapagos, like Mesprit, those two can they could probably run like AV and be somewhat decent answers and hit back pretty hard. Or at least Terrapagos can. And then one low tier pick that I like, may not be super great in draft, but Ursaring, fan favorite around here. And Guts is always fun to see. Guts, Facade, anything, as you know, with Ursaluna. But overall, I think this team is decent, but definitely has a problem dealing with fairy types for sure.
Yeah, I would mention ice types too. I think even more so than fairies, this team has an ice problematic issue, especially if the ice is like, for example, this is a team that Mamoswine really dominates. Mamoswine like crushes all these Pokemon except for Scizor, and Scizor doesn't really want to switch in on Mamoswine too much. I will say this team has absolutely fantastic Terra Captains. Iron Thorns, if it can get out of its really bad typing, is actually a good stat block Pokemon. Really strong moves. It has Dragon Dance. The coverage is pretty decent with Electric and Rock and Ground and all that. And it has the Tapu Koko to help boost it, which is really good. So I'm a huge fan of Iron Thorns with Tapu Koko, actually, especially with Terra. I think the Terra captains on this team in general are very strong. I'm sad that Centiskorch and Cradilly can't be Terra, because I think with Terra they're pretty good. I think Cradilly, even without Terra, is very good. I'm a big Cradilly fan. I think Cradilly is a little underrated in what it does, which is it has Water Absorb, so it's a water immunity, which is nice. And it also is a Stealth Rocker, and it has Recover. So its Spadef is actually much better than people think. It's a very decent Spadef wall, and it also could run Curse and could be potentially threatening offensively. I do think it's a little odd to take Mega Garchomp and Mega Latios.
Garchomp, Mega Latios.
To take regular Garchomp and Mega Latios. I think that's a little bit of an odd choice, especially so early on in your team construction. Like theoretically, for what you're going for. Mega that could have been taken at that spot, if I'm being honest. But I think like a Terrapagos, for example, is a pretty decent Pokemon. Sometimes it does that thing, like depending on the matchup, where it kind of just sits there and chips everything with like a Terra Starstorm. Mesprit is like it's like a nothing Pokemon in my opinion. I don't know. I feel like almost all the time it does nothing. You could run like a setup set maybe. It gets rocks and U-turn, I'm pretty sure, so you could do that stuff. But I find little use for like a defensive, not super offensive ghost type, psychic type like Mesprit. It doesn't min-max the way that its two siblings do. So yeah, I think the thing really helping this team is its Terra Captains. I think the Terra Captains are very strong here.
Alright, now we move on to someone who's in the booth, their team, the Blackthorn Teddiursas, Kuma's team. Exalted, start us off with what do you think about his team?
Okay, going back to the first round pick, I think Iron Valiant is a very scary Pokemon. That mon has 1,000,001 sets it can run, and all of them are good depending on the matchup. I think also Iron Treads though to pair with it is really good. I think it's a really good spinner. Gets Volt search whatever, so it can keep pivoting in and out. And I just think it has a lot of uses. Hydreigon, I've been a big supporter of this Pokemon. I think it's very solid. Obviously, a pseudo, so it has some of the best stats you could. Just a really solid physical, or not physical, special attacker, in my opinions. But I think it gets Roost, it gets Tailwind. You could run more support sets if you want. Let me actually look at the Terra Captains for once. I like these Terra Captains personally. I like Terra Noivern. I think Entei could be. I think Terra Entei could be very good, and Pikachu has options with it. Yeah, I think, like I like to say, it's just a very good, solid team. I think there's just a lot of good mons on here. I think it has some different cores you can go into depending on the matchup, and I think this team can do it all.
One thing I always see whenever I find a normal ground type bear that I always see in matchups is like, okay, what's your switch in? And especially with Ursaluna Blood Moon, there is none. You don't really ever have one. Ursaluna Blood Moon can literally just run specs, get 2 kills, die, and it has done its job. Because nothing can switch in, nothing can really take 2 hits and really kill it back, as it's decently bulky. Having Mind's Eye as well, it doesn't face the same problem that its counterpart does in just regular Ursaluna, because it can actually hit ghost types, and it can hit steel types as well, which regular Ursaluna can as well, but it just can't hit the ghost types, which is another limiting factor of regular Ursaluna. But then also pairing it with the like speed of Valiant, Treads, Noivern, having like a Scarf Hydreigon potentially, Entei is a decent speed tier, and then even then being able to have speed control with Rotom Wash and clicking Thunder Wave on everything as it just kind of sits there and Volt turn or Volt switches and Hydro Pumps is also a very, very strong asset. Having Venusaur there that can just take any like not any, but in most fire or ice type hits, and just kind of Leech Seed, Synthesis, Giga Drain, or Energy Ball is definitely going to be a very, very valuable asset to this team, and just kind of being able to be slow when it wants to, and then be balls to the wall hyper offense when it wants to as well.
Yep.
And with that, we move on to the final team in the Infernape division, the Chicago Cutie Flies. Kuma, start us off with this one.
This team seems. I see what they're going. They have like this mini snow core with Galarian Snow King, Kyurem, and Slush Rush Arctozolt. And I am very curious because I know this is a Terra Arctozolt. I'm pretty sure. So
Yep.
Terra Electric Bolt Beak under like it's just gonna. It seems very matchup fishy. This team seems like kind of a matchup fish sort of team. But I can respect it. I think they have like good options as well with Kartana and Swallow and Mega Heracross and Crocodile. All these mons are very like strong physical breakers. Primarina can also function as a special breaker with like a spec set. Their spinner is unfortunately Komala, which is not the best spinner you could ask for, especially when you have a Swallow. Alolan Marowak also seems such an odd pick for a fire type on this team. They do have a Galarian Slowking, so like they could run Trick Room if they want to, but I don't think that's what they're really trying to go for when they have a Slush Rushmon and a Swallow and a Crocodile that likes to run Scarf and Kartana and other things like that. I think the team is interesting. It's not bad, but it is interesting, is what I'll say.
I do think that the Trick Room angle could work definitely really well, seeing as there is a Mega Heracross, Alolan Marowak, heck, even Komala with Choice Band can kind of hit hard. Arctozolt doesn't have to be Slush Rush in this scenario. It likes to be, but it doesn't have to be. And so it could do some work there potentially. Sinistcha and Primarina also don't mind Trick Room as well, especially if Prim wants to function as like a Choice Specs breaker. Not a lot of things want to switch into that. Sinistcha doesn't really want to function solely under Trick Room, as it doesn't have the most offensive power. It can set up and do some offensive things in that way, but it's not wanting to be like the Mega Heracross and Alolan Marowak, who just kind of click buttons, especially Alolan Marowak being able to just click Rockhead Flare Blitzes and into almost anything, and then hit things with Poltergeist as well. So that's definitely something that needs to be on the mind of other players. But Slowking also doesn't want to stay in for that many turns trying to set up Trick Room and then get out. But overall, it is definitely an interesting team. I think it can work. Definitely seems, like Kuma said, a matchup farm. But I do like some of the pieces that are on this team. I just don't know how well they're going to work together in this scene.
If I'm noticing, Baxcalibur isn't taken in this league, correct?
I believe so, yes.
I don't think
This team should pick Baxcalibur up. I think this team has the makings to be really, really good. I think it's like semi-snow. I've done it before. I think it works. I think it's actually a very strong idea to have like a low tier Terra that takes advantage of snow, and a high tier that also kind of takes advantage of snow, and your snow is just a really good Pokemon, where there's another benefit in that it switches out. I think it falls a little bit in the fact that Swellow and Alolan Marowak really can't be Terra on the team, so I think those are like odd Pokemon to have. Picking Crocodile like second, the Crocodile was the first pick of the second round, right?
Yes.
That seems kind of crazy to me, especially like Iron Treads was picked right after that. It's kind of wild. I think Sinistcha and Primarina are amazing picks. I think both of those Pokemon are absolutely fantastic. I will agree the Trick Room angle seems to be like one of the stronger plays for this team. I'm not a huge Mega Heracross fan. I think it's just alright overall. It's like we said, it's kind of slow. And usually what I find, even though it's really strong, usually what I find with Mega Heracross is it does it in one shot. It usually does enough to like get you low, but then it dies. So it's like one of those Pokemon, in my opinion. I think Kartana is very scary. You need to have like really fat grasses or something along those lines to really deal with Kartana. Really fat fire, maybe. I think this team like navigated well, and like maybe dropping Swellow and picking something else up, and like dropping Swellow and maybe. I don't know. I do like Kyurem. I like Kyurem for being able to hit from both sides. Baxcalibur probably is better, so maybe if you drop Swellow and drop Kyurem and pick up Bax and use the extra points on something else, that could be interesting. I do think this team, it's not terrible. It's pretty decent.
All right, and with that, that is the Jungle Arena League Season 1 full roster of all the teams, all analyzed. I hope to see everyone from outside the community and inside see what they do with their teams, and see I can't wait to see people watching the matches as they get live commed, go up, and just overall have a good time. I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.